Hello and welcome everyone to the Canistan podcast. Today I have a very special guest joining us from the USA. We have Scott Horton. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to be with you.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, before we get started, you have a huge fan base. I know there might be some of us who are watching you for the first time. Would you be able to just give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, I'm basically an anti-government libertarian type from Texas. I align my politics with the great Texas congressman and former presidential candidate Ron Paul. And, we are very free market, capitalist oriented, private property oriented, and we want very small government. And so the fact that our government maintains a world empire is, of course, very contrary to the goal of having a very limited government at home. In fact, a world empire necessitates a big government at home. And so the key to trying to restore something like a constitutional order here in the United States has to begin with, ending American imperialism around the world and leave the rest of the world alone so we can mind our own business.
Yeah. Scott, thanks for that. So you have your own, is it like a podcast, online radio? What do you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been doing an interview show since 2003. I've done more than 6,000 interviews over the years. I've been
Scott, that's why I wanted to ask you, how the hell do you do that?
Well, I just, I'm a radio guy, so I've always had a show, and it's been primarily an interview show since then. And at antiwar.com, we featured, the most important writers in the world on these subjects. So then I just interviewed them all. And that's my endless, stock of writers to talk to. And it's always subject matter based. So I go by the article rather than by the author. You know what I mean? And then, I run the Libertarian Institute, which is, we're very heavily into foreign policy, me and some of the guys, but then there are a lot of others that have broader interests as well in the libertarian movement.
Yeah. So how many interviews do you do a week?
Well, these days, like 2 or 3. I mean, there was a time where it was 10 or 15 a week or whatever. I had a 3-hour show, so I do 2 or 3 interviews a day, every day. And then there have been times where, even when I was writing a book, I would do like 10 interviews on a Friday, and try to catch up on everything. But I have so many responsibilities now that the interview show, unfortunately, has taken a back seat. But I have a couple of major projects I'm working on now, including finishing up the audiobook of my most recent book, Provoked. And then once that's done, I plan on kind of relaunching the show and primarily being a show host again, because that's what I like to do the most.
I was going to ask you, so I knew that you were involved in writing a book. How's that going? How far is it to publication?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm not writing any more books now. I've published 5. 3 of them I wrote. 2 of them are just compilations of transcripts of interviews I've done. One of them with Ron Paul and the other with nuclear weapons experts. But the 3 I've written, one of them is about Afghanistan. It's called Fool's Errand. Then the other is about the entire terror war, 7 or 9 wars, or however you count them, is called Enough Already, and that came out in 2021. And then the latest is called Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. And I put that out last November. And that's the background to the whole new Cold War.
That's amazing. Scott, yes, I wanted to talk to you about foreign policy. I know you're very keyed into the whole Ukraine war, but I might not have time to go into that today just because I wanted to cover the Middle East. But I'd love to have you back one day to discuss that as well.
Sure.
To start with, like as a libertarian, how do you rank Trump's kind of term so far?
Well, I mean, I'll try to say something nice to start, which is the American Democratic liberal left needed to be stopped and smashed. Usually, I'll be the first to tell you that there's just no difference in the candidates, Bush versus Gore or Obama versus Romney or whatever. It doesn't make a dang bit of difference at all. In this case, though, not really the left, sort of the left, but mostly like the center left liberals had just been on this insane rampage since really the end of the W. Bush years. And Trump just brought out the worst aspects of all the liberals and leftists and progressives and everybody, and just drove them nuts, and they're driving me nuts, and they had to be stopped. So
Yeah.
I did not vote for Trump, but I was rooting for him. I rooted for him all 3 times because I hate the damn Democrats more. You know, they're just so horrible. It's unbelievable. And especially on absolute core issues like censorship. I mean, I don't know how it is where you live, but in the United States of America, rule number 1 in our Constitution is Congress has no authority to pass any law telling anybody what they can say or not say. It's the same amendment. The First Amendment is the same one that says they can't tell us what church we're allowed to go to or not. And they can't make an official state religion that we have to follow. We can choose our own. The freedom of the press, the right to assemble with other human people. These are things that the national government is forbidden from interfering with in the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution. And the liberals don't care about that at all. They would just as soon use the entire power of the empire to shut up anybody who doesn't agree with them. So that's just one of the most horrible things about them right now. And of course, there's this, what happened was with Donald Trump, they just reacted so badly against his election as a repudiation of just everything about them. And, it was really the CIA and the FBI that started it. And the Democrats got on board for this whole frame up of Donald Trump as some kind of Russian agent. And they did that to try to stop him from being elected. That was the cheat, that they were going to get him to be the nominee, but then they were going to destroy him and usher Hillary Clinton in. But it didn't work. And he won anyway. And because people really hated Hillary Clinton so much is the main reason. But so then what happened, though, was the FBI and the CIA and the Democrats had framed him for treason, the media going along with the whole thing. Yeah. So then they just kept it up and they kept it going for years, And so in that case, that means like out in the country that regular liberals, regular Democratic voters found themselves allied with the FBI and the CIA. These are the heroes of America in the national security state, protecting us from the guy that won the election. And they are in like Egyptian under the Egyptian regime under the Muslim Brotherhood. They just refuse to obey and carry out the new boss's orders, right? They just do whatever they want instead. And so liberals in the country came to see the national security state as their big savior from these horrible, this horrible aberration coming from the right. And then on top of that, even though Trump can be very lousy on things sometimes, which I'll talk more about in a second, I guess, which was really your question. He talks a good game about peace, but to the liberal mind, that just means he's getting Trump all over the message of peace, right? He's smearing peace with the message of his horrible, horrible right-wing nationalism that they react so badly against, right? And so you just see, outright hippies aligning with the national security state, and including especially like on the Ukraine war. Yeah, because it's like branding. It's the same way they all wore masks as long as they could. And the mask really was not about COVID. The mask showed that you were not a Trump supporter because it was the Trump supporters who'd taken their masks off. So all the Democrats kept their masks on longer, right? Like this is the mindset of the liberal left in America. I still see them. They still wear masks to this day, man, in Austin, Texas. Like not all of them, but some. It's incredible. But then so Trump, but so that made them just intolerable, right? And then he ran on peace, which he could have ran on I kill Muslims dead, blah blah, like Bush and McCain and whatever, right? And it's true that he did for 4 years, right? He escalated and finished a massive war in Iraq War III in Iraq and Syria in 2017 and into 18. And he kept up the air war against Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia the whole time. I mean, Yemen was outsourced to Saudi and UAE, but they're flying American jets and dropping American bombs with American money, right? Well, their own money maybe. But and he kept all that going a long time. But he ran on. He didn't start any new wars. This war would have never happened if he'd been there. He said that about Gaza and about Ukraine, right? Yeah. And that was the mantra. And that's what that truly is like legitimately what most Republican voters do respond positively to. Now, on the other hand, if he had said, "Oh, I kill Muslims dead real good," then they might rally around that too, right? Like if he started bombing Iran, they would say, "Well, the Ayatollah clearly deserves it, or we wouldn't be doing this," kind of thing. They're going to rally around their leader. But that is his message, is a message of peace. And, that they smear it as isolationism, which is, in fact, he's worse on open trade than he is on bringing the troops home from their point of view. You know what I mean? But it's not isolationism to just not be warmongers, right? Nobody accuses Brazil of being an isolationist power because they don't intervene everywhere in the world. We just think of them as a normal country, right? Not isolationist. It's only isolation. It's this horrible, terrible thing. I remember, well, long ago in like the 1990s, there was a Newsweek article that asked the question, will America brace its new globalist future, or will it cower in the shadows of isolationism? And then the graphic was like the corner of a room with like an open door and the shadow behind the door. And so which is the choice? We're going to go through the door. We're going to cower in the shadows of not bombing people all the time. You know what I mean? Like that's the way they try to frame the thing. So he has appealed to the best of the right and the best of Americans who want peace. I mean, the thing is, people are so gung-ho for World War II, and W. Bush demanded it. W. Bush said, look, not only are we starting wars, we're torturing people, and we're spying on you, and you love it. And they were like, okay, we love it. But then in 2014, when ISIS rolled into Western Iraq and created a caliphate, Americans, even kind of not very well-informed pro-war Americans, they knew the names Mosul and Ramadi and Fallujah and Tikrit. And they said, what do you mean all of these cities that all our guys just fought for, supposedly, are now in the hands of, like, might as well be bin Laden himself in the form of this guy Baghdadi. And people just felt so jaded by the results of the wars. And that really was all Obama's fault. So, yeah. And so Trump was smart to say, Jeb Bush is the brother of the guy that ruined everything. Vote Trump, right? And that was how he ran in 2016. So there's a lot of potential there. And you can see, because he thinks out loud a lot. He takes all sides of every issue. But you can see where he has this mindset. He talked about, he goes, I want to sign a brand new gigantic nuclear treaty with Russia and China at the same time. And then that way, we could just not have wars against anybody. We could not only not have a war on terrorism, but we could not have so-called great power competition either. We could just be a country, and the world could essentially be at peace and in a cooperative sort of profit-seeking mindset for everyone for into the next millennium. Why not? Why do we have to fight about everything? Why does it have to be the challenge of the rise of China? Well, maybe we could just deal with the rise of China. Like, whatever, man. You know what I mean? So he does talk that way. So there's so much potential there. But of course, as I'm sure you're aware, the huge flaw in all this, well, one, he's got backwards theories of trade policy and stuff. But worse is Zionism, right? He's a complete sellout to Israel. And they demand American imperialism. If America is not available to protect Israel, well, they might have to move back to Russia and Germany and Poland where they're from, and they don't want to. And so, so it's in their interest to keep America involved at all costs, and they play a huge role in determining American policy here at home.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Scott, thank you for that. it's an amazing summary that you gave. First of all, I was actually surprised and really um, heartened to hear you say that. I didn't realize in the USA people pay that much attention to what's going on in terms of foreign policy. I was actually surprised why Trump has been kind of using as the peace mantra as um, a rally cry with his supporters, because I didn't realize internal USA politics of how important that could be and how attractive that might be as a slogan. But also, I didn't realize, first of all, how jaded people were from the Iraq War within USA and how that may have affected Trump's policy, but it could also affect other people's other candidates' policies in the future. Because it just seemed like, from outside, it just seemed like in the USA they just don't care about what's going on around the world, and all they care about is what's happening in terms of the jobs and
Yes,
security inside America.
that's the point, though. That's the point, right? Is it's not that like, oh, we care so much about what happens to the poor Iraqi people. It was, what the hell are we doing? Wasting all our money, blowing up Iraq and then rebuilding it and then blowing it up again and then rebuilding it again. Like, it's not so much leave those people alone, it's leave me alone. Why do I have to be forced to participate in any Iraqi politics at all? I don't want to side with Dawa or Askari or Sadr or the Sunnis either. Like, I just want to not be involved in the whole thing. And that's, see, this is it's a terrible contradiction, right? That America is made up of people who in previous eras had fled the old world so they could come here and be free and be peaceful and mind their own damn business. And so the old world is very far away from here. And so the American people, by and large, and I've known people in my life, they're good people. I've known people who never left their home county, who never read a newspaper, don't give a damn about what's going on in the world. They have a life, they have a family, they have some property, they have some chickens, they're just trying to be people in the world, in their own little world, you know? And what do they care if there's a border dispute between Germany and France, or between Iran and Iraq, or India and Pakistan, or any other place, right? It's just so it's, and it is a respectful instinct. It's not like it's just selfishness or whatever, but it's just saying, like, that's none of my business.
Yeah.
And so then they're properly resentful when they're being forced to pay attention to it. But of course, the catch is that the U.S. government is the most powerful government in the world and is determined to flex its dominance on all other continents. So the U.S. government makes the rest of the world our business. And so what you see is then, you know, when the government says, look, they're trying to kill us, the dangerous world out there, they're coming for us, and we got to stop them. Then the American people say, hey, if you say so, then let's go get them. We'll stop the bad guys. But then we'll come home again and mind our own business again, is what is supposed to be the ideal, right? We're supposed to be permanently at peace, except when there's an exception of the major emergency where we absolutely have to go to war. Otherwise, our constitutional system presupposes permanent peace, and not an era of permanent emergency like this. And clearly our constitution can't survive it, a permanent emergency. So that's the spirit of peace. It's not like so much being a real hippie and like saying, oh, we are one with the Iraqi Shiites, let's not kill them anymore. It's more just like, hey man, just leave me out of this stuff now. You know what I mean? And again, like the part about Samarra and Ramadi and Fallujah and Tikrit is they remember those names as the cities that in many cases their own family members or friends had been to, had bought in. Hey, Jimmy, weren't you in Ramadi back 10 years ago? And now, but I'm looking on the news, the bad guys rule Ramadi. So what was the point of all of Jimmy's sacrifices over there, right? People don't need to know a lot about who's Sadr and who's Badr and who's on the ISIS side or any of that. They just know that this was this big thing that you said we had to do and it was going to be great. And now here we are, it's 8 years later and everything's gone below hell. So now what? You know what I mean? So people just, that's how they feel about it, is they're just over it. You know, we had the same thing after Vietnam. It was, and the government officials, they called it Vietnam syndrome, right? This is a mental illness on the part of the American people, that they already lost one son and now they don't want to give their remaining son to die in another stupid no-win regime change war or intervening in a civil war on the other side of the planet. after a massive stalemate in Korea and massive defeat in Vietnam.
This is Scott. This is what I never understood. I've been asking a lot of people, how how is it that America in recent decades have been involved in so many wars, and as a state, there's nothing that you can point to as in this is what we benefited. If anything, it's like a huge loss to the state. Um, Yet there's groups, there's within the state, the military complex, and people who are benefiting. But as a state, the people, everyone's losing out on this. And how has that gone so far? And how much further is this likely to go before people just say enough is enough?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely nailed it, right? There are some factions in the United States, in domestic politics, who find it in their interest to keep this whole thing going. Whereas clearly it's not in the interest of the country, the people who live on the land, between Canada and Mexico. That's a whole other question. But they don't care about us, right? We're only here to be, essentially tax animals, right? Like we live on a ranch and we're the cattle. And so we go to work all day so that they can take a third or more of it and then parse that money out to special connected interests. That's what they call them, special interests. And then a huge part of that is the foreign intervention lobby, the entire foreign policy so-called community, the think tanks and all of that. And all of those, permanent establishment structures and the massive State Department and CIA and national security bureaucracy, of course, the Pentagon and all the generals and all their civilian and military employees. And then, as I mentioned previously, the foreign lobbies, especially the Israelis. And so like in American politics, they talk about, we have a group called the AARP. It's called the American Association for the Advancement, or it's just the Association for the Advancement of, no, that's the NAACP. I'm sorry. It's just the Association for the Advancement of Retired People, I guess is what it is, AARP. So it's the old people lobby, right? We want our pensions. We want our Social Security money, and don't you cut it, right? That's their lobby. It's extremely powerful because old people are retired and they're rich and they donate to it and they make sure that it fights like hell for their interests, right? Then there's the gun lobby. And we wish that the gun lobby protected the rights of gun owners, but really they just protect the rights of gun manufacturers and they want access to sell weapons to the government. That's what they're really for, but whatever. So sometimes they dress themselves up as caring about the Second Amendment for regular people. And so they're another major lobby in Washington. And then there's the Israel lobby. And the Israel lobby, they don't have to register as a foreign lobby because they claim to just all be Americans who happen to be concerned about this foreign government. And never mind that the foreign government actually founded the group and clearly it works in their interests and directly sometimes at their orders, right? And you'll have, very official kind of establishment media organs like, say, U.S. News and World Report or the Wall Street Journal or something like that. And they'll say, well, yeah, the three most powerful lobbies in Washington are the AARP, the NRA, and AIPAC. So right there with America's retired people is the lobby of a foreign government saying you have to serve our interests. And, as Brett Stevens, who's the former editor of the Jerusalem Post and card-carrying neocon and writer for the New York Times, puts, he says, the greatest threat to Israel is isolationism among the American people, right? It's in their interest to keep us at play all the time. And, Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz, both who were two, very leading founders of the neoconservative movement back a couple generations ago, they had both said, listen, and they were speaking very broadly, and I would say out of school. I'm not saying that people should take this quite literally because they shouldn't. But he would say, we Jews have to support, that's Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz, have to support large military budgets, have to support American interventionism around the world. I'm sort of paraphrasing them both together, but they both made very, very similar statements like this in the late 70s. Have to keep America engaged around the world. In other words, even if it's China and Taiwan, even if it's whatever's going on in Europe or South America, we got to make sure that America always has a big Navy and a big Air Force and a big Army and is always at the ready and never retreats to the cowardice of the shadows of isolationism, because then Americans and our money and our weaponry won't be available to protect Israel's interests. And now the thing is, you can't blame them. They're a tiny little country that doesn't really belong there and has to commit these extraordinary acts of violence against innocent people in order to maintain their dominance in that area. So, yeah, they need us. So, yes, of course, their foreign policy establishment, their intelligence agencies and their foreign policy, their foreign ministry, of course, yes, their absolute highest priority is keeping America in line and ready and willing to do what they need us to do for them.
Right.
And so, but that's supposed to be the job of the Congress and the FBI counterintelligence division to tell them to go to hell and get the hell out of our country. It should be up to the American people to decide what our foreign policy is, not just, kowtowing to Netanyahu any more than any sultan in the Gulf or anybody else.
It is unbelievable. So funds, investment, weapons, they go from USA to Israel, and funds go back to the lobbies in USA, kind of forcing the government there to now do more for Israel all the time. So it's just this vicious cycle going on. It's difficult to understand who's controlling who in that whole scenario.
Yeah, it's what they call a conspiracy of interest. And that was the part I kind of left out, was the arms manufacturers, of course, are in bed with the neoconservatives and the Israel lobby. There used to be sort of an older foreign policy establishment represented by the Council on Foreign Relations, which is still there, of course. But they sort of represented Rockefeller oil and banking interests from a previous era. And they didn't really allow the neoconservatives in so much. But then the military-industrial complex guys from out west, from Texas and Colorado and Washington State and California, they needed their own eggheads to justify government arms purchases. Right? So they struck a deal with the Israel lobby. In the vanguard of the Israel lobby is the neoconservative movement. And so this is where they then created this whole couple of handfuls of think tanks of their own. I mean, they took over the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation, but then they also created their own, the Center for Security Policy, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, the Project for a New American Century, the Foreign Policy Initiative, and a whole host of them. And so then these groups then become, they're funded by Northrop Grumman and Lockheed and those guys. And then they write all these articles about how we should have this Middle East policy that, of course, is highly favorable to Israel because that's who they are. And that's what they represent is, these Zionist interests in the first place. That's their ideology. So it's the perfect mob marriage between the Israel lobby and the military industrial complex there. And then, so you had asked me earlier, so where does it all end? Well, either in a thermonuclear war or eventually the bankruptcy of the American people. We're in a situation now where we pay the interest on our national debt is now more than the military budget, at least the official military budget. And we're approaching a point where it's going to be the single largest portion of the interest on the debt, at which point we're living in a cartoon, right? Where the American people have to pay income taxation just to pay the interest on the debt. You can't even really tell me that this money's going to pay some old lady's hospital bills anymore, or even to help protect Israel anymore. Now it's just going to pay interest to some sovereign bond holder on the other side of the planet somewhere. Forget that. And at some point, there will have to be a loss of confidence in the economic system when it's rigged so badly against the people. But I don't know. I mean, you know what? The economy crashes every once in a while, and then they just print a bunch more money and build up another bubble and kick the can down the road further and further. So they may be able to keep doing that past the day I die. I don't know.
Scott, now that you've cheered us up sufficiently, how do you see the nuclear negotiations going on between USA and Iran currently?
Well, I'm extremely enthused that they're holding the talks at all. I think that's just great. The position of the U.S. government since Bill Clinton, at least, is Iran may not and cannot and will not get a nuke. Well, great. I mean, that's an easy position to take because they're not making nukes. So good deal. Like, let's start from that. But the truth is that they do seek, and they have already essentially perfected a nuclear weapons capability. They have a latent nuclear program. They've proven 20 years now, they've proven that they can enrich uranium. They've mastered the fuel cycle. They could enrich it to whatever percent they want, including above 90%, which they need for atom bomb material.
Yeah.
One footnote here, nobody ever talks about this, but it's, I guess, possible, but it's evidently very difficult to make a miniaturized implosion bomb with uranium.
Yeah.
So if they make a uranium bomb, it's going to be like the bomb that they dropped on Hiroshima, which is a gigantic gun type nuke. Essentially, it's a shotgun that shoots a uranium pit into another uranium pit down the length of the bomb. And it's a huge mechanism to do it. And so if they had one, essentially, if they had one, it would be, they'd have to detonate it in the desert for show. And if they had two, the second one would just be for sitting on, because how are they going to deliver it to Israel anyway, on the back of a flatbed truck, right? I mean, they don't have a capability to deliver the dang thing. If they were going to make miniaturized nuclear weapons that they'd be able to marry to missiles that can reach Israel, then you're talking about an advanced implosion system made with weapons grade plutonium, which they could only get as a byproduct from their heavy water reactors, which they shut down, and which would require the existence of a reprocessing facility for the plutonium to get all the impurities out, which they do not have currently. So essentially, the point being, it would be very difficult for them to have a real nuclear weapons capability. What they have now is like a pretty darn good bluff, right? That, like, listen, I got a revolver in one pocket, I got bullets in the other pocket, I got a bullet making machine at home. Let's not escalate this fist fight into, or even this argument into, a fist fight to where now we're going to start wondering if everybody's going to start reaching for their lethal weapons. Let's just not have the fight, right? That's been their stance. And back, if you go back to 2002, in the Axis of Evil speech, where Bush pretended to believe that the Ayatollah and Saddam Hussein were in a secret alliance. Get it? Yeah. And with Osama bin Laden too. Yeah. Oh, and the North Koreans, because if we say Syria, it'll be too obvious that this speech was written in Tel Aviv. Yeah. So we'll throw in North Korea there. But anyway, the Ayatollah said, and opened his books up and said, I'm a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I've got a safeguards agreement with the IAEA. So go ahead and inspect what you want. I'm not making nuclear bombs here, and you got no casus belli, right? Yeah. Now, Iraq said, yeah, same thing here. And then, but we just bulldozed right in there anyway, right? Too late for you, buddy. We're just going to pretend that you're still hiding it long enough to get our tanks on the ground. Yeah. In North Korea, they bullied them all the way out of the treaty, and they made nukes and have been protected from us all the way ever since. Yeah. But the Ayatollah's position was, first of all, I can prove we're not making nuclear weapons. But also, I will be showing you that I do know how to spin a centrifuge, and I do have a stockpile of uranium, and the whole world knows it. So, you know, he's got a weak hand, and he's decided the best way to play it is where everyone can see it, right? For years, they accused him of having a secret, illicit, parallel nuclear weapons program. That was such a lie. For years, they said that. It was such a lie. And they eventually just dropped that lie because everybody just, especially after the 2015 deal, the IAEA has access to go everywhere. And the last few suspicious sites were all resolved. Yep. There is certainly nothing like a parallel nuclear weapons program there. In fact, there's a news story out today that Fox News says they got satellite footage from the National Council for Resistance in Iran of a facility out there that's supposedly a nuclear facility where they're making tritium. That,
yes, I read that. Yes.
To boost an atom bomb to like near hydrogen bomb levels, right? So the thing is about it is, when what they don't say in the Fox News article is that the National Council for Resistance in Iran is just a euphemism for the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, communist terrorist cult of absolute kidnapping lunatics who are like the Heaven's Gate cult, who brainwash people and force abstinence on them, kidnap their children away and hold them hostage, and like used to be commies and are now mujahideen. They used to work for the Ayatollah before they betrayed him and went to work for Saddam Hussein before America invaded, and they ended up in the hands of the Americans and the Israelis. And they announce bogus propaganda material against Iran and ridiculous claims about their nuclear program all the time. One time they put out a picture of a vault door and they go, yeah, right in that vault door is where the secret nuclear weapons program is. And then, but all you got to do is right click on it in Chrome and do a reverse Google image search. And it'll tell you this picture comes from an ad from a vault company. This is like their stock photo of we make big badass vaults. Right? The whole thing is so stupid. And they've been caught over and over and over again laundering fake let's see, I shouldn't make fun. They launder fake Israeli intelligence, like the so-called smoking laptop of 2005, which they claim was a laptop of an Iranian nuclear scientist that was smuggled out of the country, which is completely forged by the Israelis and funneled through the Mujahideen call, because we know for a fact now. So what do we have? We have a satellite view of like a warehouse and a road and a truck in a parking lot or something. And they go, trust me, dog, there's tritium going on in there. And so, like, I'm going to have to reserve judgment, but consider me to be very skeptical. And then, so what does that mean? It means that probably the Israelis told them to say that because they're trying to ruin the talks. Well, that's good. There was a big explosion in a port in Iran the other day, too, last week, maybe two of them over the last few weeks. That's terrible that Israel is resorting to that, I presume. I don't know for sure, but quite possibly. Or even if it's forces inside Iran who would like to disrupt the deal, then that means that there's some really productive talks that are actually going on. Today, two of the worst senators, Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, gave a big press conference saying there cannot be any enrichment in Iran. They can have a nuclear program, but all the enrichment has to take place somewhere else. It just goes to show how negotiable this is, okay? Because under the previous deal, they could not keep a stockpile of enriched uranium at all under the fear that it could be converted to higher purity weapons grade. So the deal was, as you enrich your uranium, you have to export it out to France. And the French will convert them into fuel rods, and then you'll re-import the fuel rods, burn the fuel rods, then the Russians will come periodically and take all the waste away. Well, that was the deal we already had. So that's as good as no centrifuges spinning. Yeah. Because you have the IAEA to inspect and verify the quantities and verify non-diversion of material. And so if we're back in the deal, they're only enriching at 3.6%. There is no stockpile for them to increase. So in other words, the breakout time would be the time that it would take for them to withdraw from the treaty, kick the inspectors out of the country, and begin enriching up to weapons grade from scratch at that point. And then the time, of course, see, they always say, breakout capability is just the time to have enough fissile material. But of course, you still have to know how to make a bomb and have all of that engineering too, which is, another lengthy period of time. And then the claim has always been that if they do break out and try to make a nuke, well, America will just attack them. We'll just bomb the crap out of them. We just won't let them finish that first atom bomb. We won't let them get to it. So this is finally where we come to in these talks, is where we come to on the eve of these talks, right? As we're getting started, is Iran isn't going to make a nuke unless we attack them. And so far, at least, we're not going to attack them if they don't make a nuke. So great. It's fine. We can all just sit down and sign a deal that says everybody do like you're doing right now. It's okay. And so this is what I tried to get through people's head 10 years ago. I can't believe it was 10 years ago already. We're trying to argue back 10 years ago. Was, listen, Iran is already in the NPT. They already have a safeguards agreement. This whole thing, all of this dog and pony show, all these negotiations and everything, literally is simply to add additional protocols and subsidiary arrangements to the safeguards agreement they already have. That was what it was all about. Can we add an additional protocol to your safeguards agreement? Yeah, we can. Is completely within the realm of negotiation. So now Trump comes in, he talks real tough. He puts some B-2 bombers in Diego Garcia, and he goes, now listen, you Ayatollah, you better make a deal here. And they sit down to talk. So the question only comes down to, is Trump going to stick by his absolutely impossible poison pill, ridiculous, no point in even mentioning it, type idiot position that there cannot be any enrichment in the country. They have to completely shut down Natanz and Fordo, because there's just no way in the world that Iran is going to give in to that.
No.
On the other hand, if Trump is willing to say, look, we got to call it the Trump deal instead of the Obama deal, and we got to rearrange some paragraphs, but otherwise we got to essentially get back in the old deal. Because see, this is the other thing, and this is embarrassing for Trump, which is a huge, face is very important for him. It's a huge political calculation for him. But the thing is, the JCPOA of 10 years ago still exists. Iran is technically still part of it, although they stopped abiding by all of its restrictions, which they're allowed to under the deal if another party breaks it, as we have, as Trump did. He's the one who tore it up in 2018. But they're still in the deal with Britain and France, our allies, and Russia and China, our adversaries. They still have the deal. Not really our adversaries, but supposedly anyway. They're still within the deal. And so it has all these great restrictions, like as soon as Iran stops abiding by it, all these international sanctions kick back in, including by Russia and China, which they had all agreed to and all of that. So they have a perfectly good deal if Trump can find a way to get back into it. Maybe get rid of some sunset provisions, find a way to make it look like a real improvement. But so it really is, it's like an on or off position. Because we know the Iranians' position on all this stuff. It's been the same thing this whole time, right? So the only question is whether Trump is going to drop his most unreasonable demand. If he will, then we'll be able to get a deal.
This is interesting, Scott, because I think this is where we see a little bit of kind of separation between the policy of Trump and Israel. In Iran, and there's also another separate issue in Yemen that we can talk about later. But in the negotiations with Iran, a couple of things. First of all, I think recently Trump has made a statement that is still to be negotiated whether Iran can have enrichment or not, as long as it's kind of monitored and checkable and everything. And that's really upset Israel, because Israel wants a kind of a Libya type deal, which no way in hell Iran's going to go for, because we all saw what happened to Libya. So that's kind of really upsetting Israel, and it's kind of a bit of a separation from Trump. Also, the Michael Waltz thing, do you think that had something to do with him leaking some information to Israel about how to attack Iran?
Yeah, so, well, I don't know exactly if he leaked them any information or not, but it was reported in the Washington Post from Trump's people talking to the Post. So it was it was a believable story considering the quotes. I think it almost certainly was Marco Rubio talking to them, and saying that he had essentially, which is pretty astounding reporting for the Post, that Waltz was essentially working with Israel to pressure Trump into doing it. Like he was Israel's man in Trump's government. And so when he was advising Trump, I think you should hit him now, that this was a position that he had worked out privately with the Israelis. And then Trump got wind of this and was like, geez, I got my own national security advisor trying to sandbag me on behalf of.
I thought that was good that he fired him then. No, that showed a bit of courage.
Yeah. I mean, there's a story about when Bill Clinton first met Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996. And they went into a room for half an hour and came out, and Bill Clinton said to his people, who the F does this guy think he is? Oh my God. Like, what just happened? Who's the client state and who's the superpower?
Yeah.
Right? Because Netanyahu just talked to Bill Clinton, who is by 96, he's like reelected or about to be reelected in a landslide anyway.
Yeah.
He's the leader of the world empire.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is the brand new prime minister of what is like the size of half of Maryland or something, that doesn't even have any oil over there, like this tiny little worthless country to us. And Bill Clinton he couldn't believe it. Oh, so wow, I guess that's the way things are around here, So I think Trump has got to be experiencing a little bit of that too. In one very terrible sense, like Netanyahu is the perfect avatar for Israel, right? Like he is just rude as hell, even to his own guy. Right, even to his own friend. He's the kind of guy who just runs too roughshod. And Donald Trump is a very arrogant guy himself. He's got a lot of pride. He don't like to be told what to do. Yeah. He can be, there are some people that he sees as peers or even as elders or like, people more prominent or wealthier than him or somebody that he possibly looks up to. But like when he's the president of the United States, like he's basically feeling himself pretty well right now. You know what I mean? To have some underling come and barking orders at him. And on crucial thing, like, Trump on his worst day can't be just completely foolish about a war with Iran and what that might mean. Maybe the Ayatollah would take a few missile strikes on the chin and then just get back to work. Or maybe he wouldn't, right? Maybe we could have an all-out war with Iran in the region, and maybe all our guys in Iraq would be immediately killed by their Shiite friends, and maybe, we would have a full-scale war break off in Yemen against, or who knows what the Houthis could do there. They could invade Saudi Arabia, man. I wouldn't put it past them. Yeah. They'd kick Saudi Arabia's ass. America's helping Saudi Arabia bomb them for 10 years. And then in the midst of all that, they're getting missiles and drones off and destroying Saudi infrastructure, blowing up oil refineries. And that's how that war came to an end, was they kept reaching out and touching Saudi oil refineries. And somebody in a white robe somewhere finally came to Mohammed bin Salman and said, enough of this, man, stop it now. And they finally gave in, essentially. Yeah. Trump also just gave in and made a deal with the Houthis. We won't bomb you anymore.
That's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. So in that current deal, the deal is that both countries are going to stop attacking each other, but it doesn't say anything about Israel. So that's another thing that's affecting Israel.
Listen, I swear, I don't know what rumors you've heard. I have not been hired to work for Donald Trump. Okay, I have nothing to do with this. I hope they're listening to my show. No, listen, I don't know. I hope Netanyahu called him fat, right? I hope that this is like a personal break between the two of them. That's the best thing we could possibly hope for, is for Trump to be, maybe it was even the Michael Waltz thing that got him. Yeah. Like, geez, Netanyahu, I thought we were bros. You got to put a spy at the top of my National Security Council? Like, I don't know. And the arrogance of the Israelis knows no bounds. Clearly it has a huge part of the break between the American people and Israel that's going on right now. Like, they just push their luck so badly. Netanyahu himself said, you might remember the secretly recorded and later leaked video of Netanyahu from the year 2000, saying, oh, America is a thing that is easily moved. Yeah. 80% of them support us. It's absurd, right? He's mocking the American people for putting up with his crap. And I think the American people finally are getting that message loud and clear. They're like, oh, you have nothing but contempt for me as your benefactor? All right, then. Like, that could be a two-way street, too. I also have contempt for thee. How do you like that? And since they're the ones receiving all the money, they might find that they wish that they had had a longer and lower time preference rather than burn up all their goodwill, getting away with all the bloody murder they're getting away with right now.
Yeah. So recently, Rubio made a statement to Iran that no country that doesn't possess nuclear weapons is enriching uranium. So Iran needs to stop doing that as well, which isn't true, because we have Brazil, Japan, and Germany, all of them doing it. And according to NPT, Iran has every right to enrich uranium for peaceful means.
And look, for those countries too, it's a latent nuclear deterrent. Everybody knows Germany could make H-bombs if they wanted to. Japan certainly could make nuclear weapons. Yes. I don't know everything about Brazil's nuclear program, but yes, they clearly have mastered the fuel cycle. And that is a signal to the world that, look, man, don't threaten our independence and we won't have a problem, right? It is clearly a latent deterrent. It is not only a civilian program. It is meant to be a potential weapons deterrent. So, like, again, just like I was saying about the Ayatollah's entire position, it's like, look, man, don't make me do it, okay? Like, I mean it sincerely. I will if you make me, so don't make me. And it's loud and clear. Like, you'd have to be blind, deaf, and stupid to say, no, we got to pressure this Ayatollah until he finally does like Kim Jong-il and goes ahead and withdraws from the treaty and starts making nukes. Would be the biggest idiot thing to do in the world. Which, by the way, though, when Mao Zedong was making atom bombs, they went to Lyndon Johnson and they were like, hey, should we bomb China? And he was like, no, we're not starting a war with China to prevent the maddest madman in all of world history from obtaining the ability to fuse uranium atoms, or split uranium atoms over people's heads. Because what are you going to do? Attack China? Nah, man, we don't start wars. And Eisenhower said the same thing about Russia. You want to attack Russia? You go attack Russia. I've seen war. We're not doing that again. And because they could have done that. That was on the table. Do we invade Russia and regime change Moscow before they get atom bombs? Was clearly an argument going on at the time at the end of World War II. And then the same thing too with the rise of China's nuclear program in the early 1960s. What are we going to do here? John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson did not go to war to stop Mao Zedong, who arguably quantitatively is the worst person who ever lived, the most dangerous man who ever lived, and who once he did have atom bombs, he had said about a nuclear war, hey, even if we did get in a nuclear war with Russia, we got hundreds of millions of people. What are you going to do? You're going to kill 60 million people? I don't care. I got plenty more. Right? He killed 40 million himself. Yeah. He didn't give a damn if America nuked Beijing. Don't worry about us. We got plenty more where that came from, says the absolute lunatic. And he still didn't use nukes. And nor did America attack him to prevent him from getting nukes. And by the way, you hear the hawks all the time say, oh, the Shiites are just crazy. They want to attack Israel, and even at the cost of getting their own nation wiped off the face of the earth because they think it'll be worth it to get rid of Israel. And it's just, look, this is not true. And Netanyahu himself admits that it's not true. And Netanyahu, and at that time, his defense minister, Ehud Barak, gave a interview to Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic in 2012, where they admitted that all that they feared was that if Iran did get a nuke, that it would lead to an Israeli brain drain of talented Israelis would flee to the United States, where they would be just away from the potential, right? Even though they did not think that there would be a first strike at all. And they thought also it would give Hezbollah more freedom of action in southern Lebanon. Yeah, well, Crimea River, man. America's supposed to have a war with Persia over that?
Yes.
Or the Israelis are concerned that talented entrepreneurs are going to move to Miami? I don't care. Yeah. Seriously, go jump in the lake, man. That's your problem, not mine at all. And it goes to show that they're lying, and they're calling you stupid when they're saying, oh yeah, no, the Ayatollah wants to get nuked. Yeah. That's his problem. That's what makes him worse than Mao Zedong, is he would welcome nuclear fusion over his head. See, because that's part of his religion. Yeah.
This morning I was reading an article by someone called Said Hussain Mousavian, who is an ex-diplomat in Iran, but currently he's a professor in Preston University. And he was talking about the things that they need in order to, obviously, firstly, he was very happy as well that there's talks happening. And there are signs that both sides are coming a bit closer together, but there's obviously still a lot of ground to be covered. But a couple of interesting points you mentioned. One is that obviously we had JCPOA first. When USA pulled out of that has cost Iran billions of dollars in lost income. So that's one of the things that they're going to provide compensation for, but they may not get that at all. But the other thing was that obviously the deal that they had under Obama was to keep the enrichment under 4%. And as a leverage, Iran kept increasing the level of enrichment that they were doing, and went as with 60%. But apparently, so now they have like 270 kg of 60% enriched uranium, which according to him, people say that you could make 6 bombs out of. So that's quite an interesting thing I didn't really think of before.
Well, look, I mean, if we could get back in the deal, then we would just make sure that all that 60% enriched uranium is being used in their medical isotope reactor. Yeah, they have a reactor in Tehran that makes medical isotopes for cancer treatment and such like that. Yeah. And that's what the 60% is used for. Now, in that quantity, I don't know. And I don't know if they can reduce its purity back down, or if they could just go ahead and burn the 60% enriched 235 in their reactors or not. I guess potentially they could just have the French make fuel rods out of the 60% and burn that in their reactor too. But as I say, there is no way for them to reprocess the plutonium themselves. They don't have the facility to do that. And in the JCPOA, the agreement was that the Russians would take care of that. They would come in and, every few years or so, come and take the roof off and scoop up all the plutonium waste and bring it back to Russia. So it was a perfectly good deal. And the only reason Trump ruined it is because Netanyahu lied and pretended that they had unearthed all this new truth about Iran's secret nuclear weapons program. That was the same old lies. It was the same old stuff from the pretend smoking laptop of 2005, just repackaged. And Trump bought it and ruined the deal. And, one of the things too was there's a poison pill in the agreement. Obama didn't care, but any Republican was going to balk because every fiscal quarter, 4 times a year, they would have to certify that the Ayatollah is doing a great job of fulfilling his end of the deal, right? And so Trump he did that 3 times or maybe twice, and he didn't want to do it the 3rd time, and that was when he tore it up. Or maybe he did it 4 times in 17, and he tore it up in the first quarter, end of the first quarter of 2018, just because he felt like that was a humiliation, that he has to keep giving the Ayatollah a gold star for being perfect, even if there were still things that they wanted to debate about. And see, what's unfortunate about Israel and their role in all this stuff is that, if they had been willing to accept what they had been demanding the whole time, then everything would have been fine, right? Benjamin Netanyahu could just as well have put pressure on Trump and said, listen, Trump, you got to get them to lift the sunset provisions or some of these promises, like, for example, to not turn Fordo into a production facility, but to keep it a research facility that had a limit on it, 5, 10 years, whatever it was. Trump, you got to get back in there and get the Ayatollah to agree to lift those sunset provisions. And you know what you should do? You should make sure that their monthly total of enriched uranium is only this much instead of that much or whatever. They really were serious about being protected from Iran's nuclear program and making sure that their so-called breakout capability was as limited as it could possibly be within the realistic restriction that they've achieved the fuel cycle and they're not giving it up. Right. So, and they can make a new cascade of centrifuges tomorrow anyway. So there's, he could have done that. And Donald Trump could have come in and said, listen, Ayatollah, I think it's great that you and Obama have been getting along. I always did want to get along. So, but here's what we're going to do, though. I really need you to lift those goddamn sunset provisions. You read me, and he could have been tough about it. But he could have also been somewhat generous and said, look, we have an opportunity for a whole new era of getting along instead of not getting along. So let's do this. And, I know that the Ayatollah has pressure to his right from the Quds Force and whatever, but he's always, for the last, few times, he's made sure that a somewhat more reasonable centrist type president and foreign minister have been the ones to win, He clearly wants for and has given permission to them to go ahead and negotiate the deal. That was what he did 10 years ago. And they even brought back Javad Zarif to do the negotiation here, I had read. So I don't know exactly how things are going. I guess I could add one last thing, which is that Trita Parsi, who's the former leader of the National Iranian American Council and is one of the founders of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He's been writing a lot about this lately, and he's very optimistic about all of it. He's just, he's not getting ahead of himself, but he's just saying, this is just great that Oman is going so far to do so much to help facilitate these talks and all these things. And I was supposed to interview him today, but it didn't quite work out. But I would recommend that people take a look at his coverage. He wrote great books about Obama's efforts at diplomacy with Iran back then, as a real expert on all the aspects, including their nuclear program, but also all the diplomatic background stuff too.
Scott, also the interesting thing is talking about Oman. So Oman is kind of facilitating the conversation, discussions between USA and Iran, but Oman was also the one facilitating the discussions between Yemen and USA. And there are whispers that maybe it was Iran that convinced Yemen to do this deal because they wanted to facilitate the negotiations that were going on. So that's another good
I hope so. That would be great. That would especially be great if Trump knew that was true, that the Ayatollah had leaned on the Houthis to be less worse. Then that would be a great sign. And I could even see that would make sense that was even part of the negotiations with Iran.
I think so.
Got the deal with the Houthis done. Yeah.
So there's definitely good signs out there. Scott, thank you so much. I really hugely appreciated our discussion. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. There's lots of other things I'd like to pick your brains on. So much going on. India and Pakistan next door. Then we have the whole thing in Syria and Ukraine. So I'd love to have you back one day. I know you're a busy man, but let's see what we can do.
Great. I'm happy to do it. And let me just plug real quick. My latest book is Provoked: How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. The one before that is Enough Already, is my book on the Middle East. And I'm doing an audiobook in sections for Provoked, and all that is available at scotthortonshow.com.
Scott, thank you so much. I'm going to leave notes. I really look forward to your audiobook because I'm visually impaired myself, and I'd love to get my hands on that.
Okay,
I
great.
love audiobooks.
Okay, well,
So
thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
thank you, Scott. All the best.